it's interesting. Other stories just even kind of move out of the Christmas theme. I've said the Headless Horseman. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is such a timeless story. Now, that's one that people aren't as familiar with the narrative, the elements that happen in the narrative. Those of you who've read it or watched, certain incarnations are. But that character, the Headless Horseman, what a timeless character, and just an iconic image, and it's a loaded symbol, as I've said before, because it's one who's lost his head. As gruesome as that is, as terrifying as it is, it's also very loaded with symbolism. What does it mean to lose your head metaphorically, and why is that so dangerous, and why does that make you so dangerous when you lose your head? That's a fascinating character, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's just so visceral and seminally connected to people's fear. Eldritch Fan says, the Headless Horseman was just a jealous lover in a costume, right? He was scaring Ichabod away from the girl he was tutoring. Well, that's one way of taking the story. That is one way of taking the story. It's a satire, but the character of the Headless Horseman was actually based on a real life account from the Revolutionary War, in which I think it was a cannon. There were Hessian soldiers who are terrifying already. Hessian soldiers did not go about warfare. They did not subscribe to gentlemanly warfare. Hessians would come over and just kind of do a scorched earth kind of tactic, so to speak. I mean, they would be raping and pillaging. There was no honor to the Hessians. Not to say that, certain Americans or certain British, couldn't have fought with that lack of honor too at times during the Revolutionary War, but the Hessians were really known for it because they were mercenaries. They were just hired guns, They didn't really, have a stake in, even the British fighting the rebels, they were still trying to reclaim them back as their own land, property, whatever, So it was a different thing. So the Hessians were already terrifying. And then there's actually a story, one soldier, officer or whatever, I've got the details written down, but talked about an event where there was a battle and these Hessians were heading over the hill down towards the rebels, not rebels, the colonial, or the Americans, basically. Rebels tends to be gives people the idea that it was the Civil War, and I'm talking about the Americans, and they set off some cannons, and one of the cannons apparently knocked it just hit the guy in the head, knocked his head off, and for a brief few seconds there, as physics was taking its toll, the rider had his sword raised and was gripping the reins, and suddenly his head is gone. And there was a few moments there of the horse is still going along, and his muscles are still gripping the sword and the reins. So there was a few moments there of this headless Hessian horseman running down the hill. And it was just an image that just seared itself upon all those viewing it, and they wrote about it and they talked about it, and so it was a common story, fireside ghost story. And Irving certainly heard that. Washington Irving certainly heard that. And that's where the legend of the Headless Horseman comes from in the tale. That's why the people in Sleepy Hollow in the tale tell that story. And of course, most likely Brown Bones seized upon that because Ichabod Crane is one given to superstitions and so forth. But still, just what a wonderful character. And it's been reimagined so many times in different tellings, which is really great. What does the character of the horseman say about Ichabod Crane's character? See, that's another layer of the story. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Eldritch Fan, because Ichabod Crane is supposedly a school teacher, one who brings knowledge, and yet he's incredibly superstitious. He's also a bottomless appetite, right? For goods, for food, for Katrina Van Tassel herself. He's not, when I was watching that, like the Disney cartoon as a child, I wanted to identify with Ichabod because he was the nerdy guy who just wanted the girl, but the big mean bully wouldn't let him have her or whatever. But that's not the story. Ichabod's got his own problems, his own faults, and he's not the nice little guy. Now that can vary different tellings, and stuff. But yeah, you can, the Headless Horseman as a ghost-like character is kind of a judgment upon Ichabod Crane, somebody who should know better, who should be keeping his head, but has allowed the appetites, the Dionysian aspect of him, to overrun his Apollonian, and the superstition, the subscription to superstition is overran his logic too. So yeah, it's just all that kind of stuff layered in the story. Now, obviously, It's kind of like Grimm's fairy tales. Children hearing these stories, they're not going to understand every little psychological appeal and level of of appeal from these stories, but they respond to them nonetheless for a lot of those reasons. And it's debated, which psychological thing is going on in this story and which that. I mean, scholars can debate that to a certain degree, but you can't deny that there is a visceral appeal to the human experience. And even though the listener or the reader or the viewer or whatever doesn't always can't always consciously pull each and every one of those ideas or appeals out, they're responding to them. They're absolutely responding to them, and that's why these stories stay timeless. It's fascinating. Linking a story to something like Christmas or a holiday, even though yeah, it was yeah, in the Sleepy Hollow it was linked to All Hallows Eve as well. Um Linking a story to a holiday that is going to be around for a while, that sets a good step forward to making it timeless, but the themes have to be there, the archetypes have to be there, the the snapshot of the human experience has to be there in a way that really tells the truth, yet recontextualizes it in a way that we can understand it even better. That's just fascinating to me.